Saw dudes, just 4 days ago I released a Nova Prime level cap video. Even though I made it to level cap successfully, I could do better, so I used one of my builds to give a different perspective. As I mentioned in the other level cap video, Nova is one of those frames that you can bring through any type of content. She has flexibility that not many other Warframes have the luxury of enjoying. That being said, let's get into yet another level cap run and loadout guide. Let's get started. The Nova Prime build on screen was featured in the dedicated build video and is considered the antimatter drop nuke build. This is the build I used in the run, but there is an alternative for level cap that I suggest using for better quality of life. The aura for this build is Corrosive Projection, which reduces enemy armor for higher effective damage output. Power Drift slightly increases ability strength and can prevent knockdowns in a pinch. Prime Continuity increases duration for better null star scaling, and the area of effect for both Pillage and Molecular Prime. Prime Flow increases energy reserves for spamming, since you will need to do a ton of that in level cap. Stretch and Overextended increase the explosion radius of antimatter drop, making it easier to nuke groups. Transient Fortitude and Blind Rage increase ability strength for Pillage's defense strip and antimatter drops damage. Rolling Guard provides iframes for emergencies, and Equilibrium provides better energy economy with Nova's passive. As you can already tell, Pillage is our helmet ability, shredding armor and shields while simultaneously refreshing our shield gate and cleansing ourselves of status effects. It scales with duration just like Molecular Prime and operates similarly, making it intuitive to use in a mission. The arcanes I ran were Augmented and Arcane Rage. Augmented increased the damage of antimatter drop and the defense strip from Pillage. Arcane Rage increased the damage of my primary weapon, Kuva Sobek, to quickly proc acid shells on kill. Now, if you want to have an easier time in level cap than I did, use this build shown on screen. For this setup, we're taking out Stretch and Overextended, and subbing in Fast Deflection and Vigilante Vigor. Both mods decrease the shield recharge delay and increase shield recharge rate, making Nova's shield gating much more reliable on top of Pillage. You'll also notice that instead of Augmented, you can use Aegis for even more shield gating safety. This build prevents preventable deaths by giving Nova a near constant buffer to rely on, even in heated situations. Even though Pillage is the chosen helmet, you can subsume it over Null Star in this build. You will be sacrificing some ability damage reduction, but will gain massively increased map traversal. Wormhole does not have any damage potential linked to it, but it can help with rotation times and Void Cascade. Antimatter Drop won't have nearly as much range as it did before, but most of the damage will still be retained. If you enjoy moving faster, then try using Escape Velocity in the Exilus slot. This time around, I got my Archon Shard fiasco fixed. I have one Tauforge Amber Shard for casting speed, then I have two Tauforge Crimson for strength, and two for duration, all of which help scale Molecular Prime and Pillage. You don't need any of the Crimson Shards, but they are a nice quality of life change. If you are experiencing energy issues, you might want to consider using a Violet Shard with the Equilibrium perk. I use the same primary weapon as I did in my last video, which is the Kuva Sobek with a Toxin Progenitor. I use Galvanized Hell, Galvanized Savvy, Critical Deceleration, Primed Ravage, Prime Chilling Grasp, Magnetic Strafe, Vigilante Fervor, Acid Shells, and Vigilante Supplies, with primary crux being my arcane of choice. Using Prime Chilling Grasp creates viral damage, which increases damage to health on a status proc. Magnetic Strafe helps strip Overguard, making it easier to melt Thrax units. The viral damage will help prime crowds for Molecular Prime explosions, which inherit the damage and effect from Acid Shells for a cascade effect. This time around, I used Epitaph Prime as a backup weapon and used a damage build. I used it with the rationale that I could headshot priority targets, then add clear with my Kuva Sobek. However, after the run, I think that using a primer build is better since it will help with survivability and Kuva Sobek's damage output. For the primer build, you can inflict guaranteed cold procs, which stack on top of the slow provided by Molecular Prime. You'll also incur Blast and Radiation for additional crowd control and a whole other slew of random procs from secondary encumber. If you don't have Epitaph Prime, you could always use Kuva Nucor as well. Praedos was the melee I ran with, and it had the following perks: Drifting Grace, Shockwave Synergy, Evolved Ascension, and Universal Readiness. This melee was used as a movement steroid and nothing more. Nova is especially squishy up close and personal, so melee combat was not a suitable option. Of course, you could always use Okina Prime Incarnon, but Praedos is my comfort pick, so it's very hard to stay away from it for too long. The Panzer build I went with was the standard one I have shown in my other showcases. Tenacious Bond and Reinforced Bond are required to make Kuva Sobek reliable in clearing crowds and Thrax units, so don't take those off. The flexible mod in this build is Vicious Bond, which strips armor. For more Eximus damage, I recommend swapping this out for Momentous Bond. Killing Eximus units will grant a random 120% elemental damage bonus to the Panzer for 30 seconds, and any Eximus kills will reduce recovery time by 18 seconds. Eximus units are extremely common in Steel Path, so this is a great choice for overall status application and companion damage. The Panzer Claw build is the same as the last Nova Prime showcase. I used Balanced Posture to ensure all enemies were primed effectively. Shocking Claws drastically increases status chance and applies electric damage. Bite increases crit chance enough to give us a crit damage bonus via Tenacious Bond. The rest of the mods increase the damage that the Panzer does and primes them for attacks from our weapons. Madurai is the focus school I used as usual. Void Strike and Void Fuel were used to kill Thrax units and make Kuva Sobek hit harder in emergency situations for quick mob clearing. Phoenix Talons increases physical and operator damage and works well with Molecular Prime. Power Transfer decreases the casting time for all of Nova's abilities, making shield gating easier to manage with Pillage. Sling Strength increases ability strength, which doesn't help Molecular Prime since the effect is already capped out, but it does affect Pillage's defense strip. Finally, we have Contamination Wave to make Thrax units take more damage from our amp. The amp I used was the standard 147 or Certus Brace, Raplac Prism, and Fat Scaffold. This is the amp I always use, and I still recommend it if you want to try out level cap runs. I used Magus Cloud, Magus Lockdown, Eternal Eradicate, and Eternal Onslaught as my operator arcanes. It's time to talk about how the run went. I feel like this run was a bit better, minus some technical issues and frame drops. Ever since the last hotfix, I've been experiencing some stuttering and periods where I thought the game would crash. Thankfully it didn't. As I mentioned in my last level cap Void Cascade run, I do not like the damage reduction approach. Instead, I opt to completely nullify incoming damage through shield gating. That's why my build and approach to combat this time around is so different. I did not use Null Star that much, if at all during the run. The most it could do was stagger enemies and apply blast status, and since we don't have molecular fission on the build, it was kind of a waste away slot. That's why I recommended subsuming over Null Star on the updated build. Since you won't be using it in damage applications or survival reasons, it becomes our subsume slot. With Pillage as our means of survival and increasing damage potential, Nova got to shine just like Dr. Phosphorus, albeit a bit more elegantly. Kuva Sobek, modded with acid shells, works great against enemies without armor, because all of the damage can be transferred effectively. Of course, there's always the issue of linear damage falloff, but given the enemy density and level cap, that's not much of an issue. Nova takes acid shells to the next level. Killing a primed enemy with a Sobek modded with acid shells will cause damage from the explosion to trigger the mod's effects. This releases a cascade of explosions, causing one kill to daisy chain and wipe out whole rooms. Molecular Prime's damage vulnerability debuff is great for increasing acid shells damage and somewhat counteracts the linear damage falloff. Also, our companion Enviro modding helps with increasing damage to health, allowing the max HP damage to scale high enough into level cap. Pillage allows all of this to happen reliably and makes armor and shields an afterthought. The main thing I would change about this run is using the second Nova build shown earlier with the shield gating mods and Arcane Aegis, using a primer build on Epitaph for better crowd control and Sobek damage, and even using Momentous Bond on my Panzer. Other considerations I would like to bring up is the use of Felarks over Kuva Sobek. Felarks, with its devastating attrition perk, can increase the damage of Nova's Molecular Prime explosions by 20 times if it activates. It's not going to be quite the same as acid shells, but it still hits hard, considering the viral procs from our Panzer Vulpaphyla and Pillage adding even more damage. It also receives a multiplicative damage bonus from Galvanized Savvy for even better scaling, making it a superb Thrax killer. The only reason why I don't use Felarks is because it's too easy. If anything, I try to avoid using over-the-top Incarnon weapons because they trivialize content, and I would rather focus on the frame itself. Additionally, I would also like to try out Nautilus Prime with Cordon, as a viewer mentioned, to group enemies up for easier killing. I don't have a Nautilus Prime built out just yet, hence why I still use my trusty Panzer, but it is something worth chewing on if you have one lying around. While I did go down a lot in the footage, that's honestly down to skill issues and a non-specialized shield gating build. I don't feel like it was a massive problem since all the armor on enemies was stripped, meaning I could easily self-revive with Last Gasp. The whole mission, I only used 2 revive tokens, which was due to poor coordination with my team. If I had used the recommended shield gate setup, I bet I wouldn't even have gone down in the first place. Unlike the last setup, I don't feel like this build fell off in the slightest. Yes, enemies did get tougher to kill towards the end, but not by much. My Kuva Sobek was still filling Thrax units with lead and setting off chain explosions. Antimatter drop was taking care of fodder on corners and making it somewhat safer to rotate to the next Exilizer site. Molecular Prime was constantly debuffing enemies and slowing them down. I don't feel like this build can go wrong. With a coordinated team and a good secondary weapon, you can really hold your own. Stacking cold and radiation procs on enemies is a game changer for survivability, not even considering Molecular Prime. If you ever want to give Nova Prime a chance in level cap, this loadout is the one I would recommend going forward. My recommendation for Nova Prime in level cap still stands. She is still a powerhouse and reminds me of Dr. Phosphorus dancing to the Wanderlust King, but with less burning and more exploding. I will say that your helmet slot is more up to preference. None of Nova's first 3 abilities are bad. They just suit different use cases, some of which are not applicable in the level cap setting. If you enjoy moving around quickly, keep Wormhole and use Escape Velocity for faster movement speed. If you value heat application and damage reduction, keep Null Star. If you want to nuke small villages, go ahead and hold onto Antimatter Drop. The choice is yours, and that is the beauty of Nova. You aren't locked into one playstyle. You get to pick how you want to play, with little to no negatives. I hope this updated level cap video helped. Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, thank you for watching, and happy farming. Stay safe.
importance of clarity and purpose.